Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mini Storage Messenger Self-Storage webinar series. I'm Keith Rawson, Social Media Manager at Minico Publishing, and I'm delighted to have you all in the audience today. This is one of several informative webinars planned for self-storage owners, operators, managers, investors, developers, and other industry professionals. The sponsor of today's webinar is District Manager and is presented by Paul Darden. For nearly 30 years, Paul Darden has been involved in buying, selling, owning, developing, managing, and auditing hundreds of storage facilities. Based on years of his deep-rooted experience and feedback from peers in the self-storage industry, Paul has developed the criteria, thresholds, and algorithms underlying the District Manager software. Since its first release in early 2010, District Manager has become a favorite with hundreds of clients across the United States and Australia. This year marks the 32nd anniversary of the Mini Storage Messenger, providing the self-storage industry with in-depth news and information. Each issue of the Messenger offers cover stories and feature articles on the most timely industry topics and trends. Monthly columns contributed by industry experts and accomplished business professionals address a wide range of topics, including security, facility operations, technology, legal issues, legislative updates, construction, and development. We also publish a wide variety of other self-storage data sources like the ones you see listed, and for more information, please visit ministoragemessenger.com. Before we get started today, we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We do invite you to submit questions throughout the webinar. All right, simply type in your question into the chat area and click send. Depending on the question, we will answer it privately or to the whole group. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A period at the end of the webinar. Those that we can't get to due to time constraints will be answered via email after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available for viewing on demand from our archives at the Mini Storage Messenger at ministoragemessenger.com. Today's presentation should run about 45 minutes, with the remainder of the hour open to questions and answers. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to Mr. Paul Darden. Paul, how are you doing today, sir?
Excellent, Keith. There we go. First, I'd like to thank you very much, Keith, for letting us have the opportunity to make this presentation today. I want to note for the audience that I am up in the Andes Mountains right now between Ecuador and Peru, so if you hear a rooster crow in the background, you'll understand why. It's amazing what the technology allows us to do nowadays anywhere in the world. There are many ways that we can maximize our income, and I wanted to go over a couple of them that we didn't discuss before and reiterate a few important ones. The areas that we're going to look at today are: one, are your managers waiving too many fees or rent? Watching your economic spread, how you can truly evaluate if you're making progress with your store, and also monitoring employee theft. In looking at waiving fees and rent, we developed the District Manager software to help us audit behind the stores on a real-time basis and give us alerts as to when things were starting to appear to be going wrong, or there might be a question as to why the manager chose to do a particular activity. So let's start first by looking at tracking the fees and so forth. I'm going to switch over now to the District Manager software. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to another facility called Fair Park. And we're going to go to our Ledger Analysis suite, which is for auditing purposes. And what we can do is this gives us the basic exceptions that are at this particular time frames for the last 30 days. I'm just going to use that as a reference, but we can use entire histories back as far as there is data available on SiteLink, for example. And I might mention about the software. Currently, we are only developed for SiteLink users, but the techniques apply to any software that you're using. In the near future, we're going to be expanding our operations to support all of the major management software. And what we first do is we offer you a demo trial of it so that you can see and apply it and be amazed by the amount of money that you have increased your facility. So if we first start looking at, let's say, deleted charges, I'm going to drill down on our deleted charges here as soon as my machine will. Well, let's go to waive payments then. Okay, here we go. Deleted charge, there we go. And we can look over here the types of deleted charges they have right here, and you can then drill down to the particular ones. Let's say they have deleted insurance or rent, either one. And quickly just drill down right to that tenant and see why the manager waived the transaction. In this particular case, deleted it because the tenant had moved out and they had been charged right at the beginning of the month. They apparently didn't realize they'd moved out that evening before. There are, and then of course you can go back and we'll look at some other examples. Let's look at, this is particularly unfortunate. Let me do this. I'm going to actually move this date back, and we're going to look at, this is a really good example of finding where cash may have been deleted. Now, here are cash payments over the years that have been deleted. We want to examine those and figure out why. And so we go to cash waived payments, and then we can get a list of the various types of things that have been waived. Let's just look at the detail. And here are late fees, for example. Here are other fees. Here's rent. And as you go over and highlight over each one of them, it gives you the information about why the person was, that particular cash-paying tenant had this particular charge deleted. And in this case, to clear the bad debt, this person was auctioned off in this particular case. But you can quickly go down and analyze what was the particular reason that a person may have had their fees deleted, or why the rent may have been deleted, whether it be for waiving cash or waiving, in this case, cash, which would be very critical because that means the manager could pocket the money. You can go back and see if it was a negotiated out situation or whether it was an auction situation. One of the other things I'd like to go back to here and put this back to 13, I want to show you where you can also spot with the software. One of the things that we find is important, let's see, maybe I need to go back a little further. There was one particular tenant, I'll find one here for you real quickly, that, let me sort the units, and I know the unit right here is 845 I'm looking for, but let's just pick a particular one. And what we're looking for example, as we drill down, is if we see, for example, right here where the manager is making several waived payments in a row, or down here, what that gives us an indication is that the manager may need to be given additional training in order to avoid making the same mistake over and over again. And so this is one of the benefits of being able to look and see what has occurred and when the managers. Now, one of the ways that we also look at it is by the exceptions by the managers themselves, and so we can say by employee and figure out which employees seem to have the most exceptions. Here's an example like Glenn has 745. Of course, he's the main operator at this location, so he would have the majority. But with that large number, that means obviously over the life of the facility, we've got to analyze and say, well, does he need more training or not? But that looks like a large number, but he is the primary operator there and manager at the store. One of the things that is we also look at is a manager, for example, playing favorites with the tenants. And if we look at exceptions by, let me first be sure to get tenant exception overview, and I'm going to look for exceptions specifically by tenant of late fees. And what this ends up showing us, for example, is Christopher Evans has been waived 12 different times on late fees for a total of $180. Now, I understand a few late fees being waived, but after the fourth time or so, then we begin to wonder, well, why is it that this tenant is constantly being waived? And in this case, well, we have three of them. Well, we have about 5 of them that have been more than 6 times. We're going to need to call the manager and go click online and drill down and find out, well, why is this person constantly being waived? Is the manager paying favorites with a particular tenant? So all of this software that we use runs in the background and analyzes what the managers are doing at any given time frame, and then can send email alerts back to the home office for a regional person to look at and analyze whether they need to do further training or whether they need to take some disciplinary action. Moving back to the, I'm going to move back now to, there we go. we go. Oops. Here we go. To the next screen. Sorry, I went backwards. Apologize. Okay, now watching your economic spread is very important also, and being able to understand when to be able to raise your standard rates, and also when you want to raise the fees that it is the basic discounting and concessions that you've given for people to move in. One of the other areas that we'll talk about is avoiding some of the tricks that some people play with economic spread. So now I'm going to go back to the software again. Where do I have to get? I can see it. Here we go. And I'm going to go to a different report, and where we're doing looking at the economic spread. I want to go to a specific location here, and I'm going to go to our Fair Park location, and then I want to look at a particular chart. So I'm going to go up and look at a chart that is our occupancy charts by area and effective occupancy. Now I need to explain this particular chart because it's a little complicated. There's three lines on it. A blue line that's up at the top, which is our physical area occupancy, and at this time it shows that we're approximately 95% occupied, about 94%. The green line below it is the economic occupancy, and the orange line is the income. And what I want to discuss first is between the difference between the blue line and the green line. The area occupancy versus economic occupancy, many of you are probably familiar with that, but basically represents the spread, that distance between the two represents the spread of things that are given away at the store location, whether it be concessions, discounts, employee theft, any of the things that lower the actual occupancy economically versus the actual physical occupancy. So it's an important trend to watch those two. And the reason for that is in whether your overall, like this analysis is overall occupancy, you see when the economic spread is narrow, like it is up until February, we realized that we were doing very well on our occupancy and that we wanted to burn off various concessions and so forth. And well, actually, in this particular case, we wanted to drive our income up. So what we did was we raised our standard rent at this, knowing we're coming into the leasing season. So that made it, when we raised our standard rates, that made the economic spread much wider. Then in the process of closing that down by slowly eliminating the concessions and discounts, it drives your income up. And you're seeing the income indicated as the orange line, and you see that sort of diagonal line going through. You can see how we've significantly raised the income at that location by thousands of dollars a month by just constantly opening up and then closing down the economic spread. Now, generally, overall, when you're at a spread, let's say your overall physical occupancy is at 70%, you might have a spread of 12% or more in order to try to get the facility leased up, which is obviously the most important thing, is getting it leased up. Then as you become more physically occupied, let's say at 80%, you might want a spread of 10. As you get to 85, about 7. 90, about a 5% spread. Get above 95, then you're going to be down to a 2 or 3, and at that point, you need to be raising your standard rates to open up that spread, and then slowly working at getting those spreads reduced back down again. What's important is that most of us have all in the past sort of looked at this type of analysis on an overall basis. But really what you should be doing is doing this on each and every size and type of unit that you have. Doing the same sort of theoretical analysis of saying, when I'm running out of units, why aren't I raising my rent or closing down that economic spread, those discounts that I've given away, because I'm running out of units. And as I get down to where I only have 1 or 2 units left, then I should be raising my standard rates because I know I'm going to quickly lease those, and then I'm going to be out of units altogether. So I think that's the important analysis that you want to run on a store, not only overall, but on each individual unit size and type. And to decide, as you can see what that does, by closing it down, opening it up, and then closing it back down again, you'll see how the income dramatically increases. And that's one of the major ways that you can make money with your store operations. Now, one of the other things I want to show you is the fact that you can play some tricks with this, with the economic spread too, that I want you to avoid, because you're really hurting yourself when you do this. I'm going to go up to our Buckingham location, and I'm going to show you what happened. Sometimes people will play a trick. This is not a trick. What happened here was on one particular size, we realized that we were above standard rates much more than the market was. So when we actually reduced our standard rate at this location, the spread, as you can see, decreased between the economic and the physical occupancy. And that occurred on this particular day that we changed our rates. Now, by keeping your rates to the spread, the distance between the blue and the green line too close, you're actually sort of hurting yourself. That's when you ought to be opening it back up if it gets too narrow. And it may be good to say to investors, look, we're 95% economically occupied and we're 97% physically occupied. So it makes it sound really good. But actually, you need to open spread back up because you can drive that income even higher and maintain the same exact occupancy. So using this spread technique is very important in being able to boost your income, whether you're changing your occupancy significantly or not. Now to go back again and look at, get to the right tab here. There we go. How do you evaluate whether you're really making progress with a particular location or not, and how do you compare it with the other stores? And so we look at what is called the effective gross rental income, and that is per occupied square foot. So that's your income that you're going to be receiving effectively based on what you've got currently rented by your occupied area. And that takes out and makes everything equal. You're now comparing apples to apples between stores. And it truly shows you how well you're running your store. For a better term, it might be this is your efficiency. So I want to go over to a different report now and show you. I'm going to go back to Fair Park. And we're going to go over and we're going to do, well, I need to do a business report, excuse me, on facilities. So I can compare, show you the differences between various stores. I'm going to do a group report. And we're going to be able to compare 10 of our stores at one time with this particular report. And bear with me a little bit on the speed because we're having to go from Ecuador back to our server in Dallas and back down to Ecuador for me to be able to see this. And so we're just about there. And I'm going to go down and look at the effective gross rental income. In the store that I want to show you, for example, this says this is how much money we're making per square foot of occupied income at a store. In January at Sunset, for example, we were doing 78.9 cents a square foot. And as you can see now, right, in September, we've gone up right at 10 cents, well, 11 cents per square foot. So that means we're becoming a lot more efficient in our operations. And I have to be fair to everyone that this was a store that we recently took over. And we bought it because we saw the discrepancies that were there at that store, and we knew that we could quickly turn that store around. We have several examples at that location. We've increased the income by $10,000 a month, each month over the last year. Other locations we've done as much as $15,000 a month. So what you're seeing is the square footage divided into the actual income. And so that way it gives us a way to compare our performances between stores or how well we're doing. And it also indicates, for example, let me go up and show you Buckingham. We had this particular property under contract, and it was supposed to have closed in March. And as we turned over the telephone and internet to the purchaser, unfortunately the contract did not go through, and we did not realize that they had gotten control of the telephone from our yellow paging and some of our other advertising until we were able to catch back up and realize that we weren't getting these calls, and then got it switched back to us. And what happens, you can see our income went from 86 cents a square foot down to 8.50, and then since we got back control in April, we've been able to bring that back up to 86.2. But so dips in this doesn't necessarily mean that there is a significant problem. It just means that it just shows you how efficient you are in running your operations. And it is a way of really comparing apples to apples when you're looking between stores. And you can see the increase or how much more efficient you become. For example, at Fair Park, we've increased the income about 3 cents a square foot. Sunset is unusual, but that was an opportunity we saw and took advantage of at that location. So that's a good measure of looking at how to change your income by watching your effective gross rental income. Now I'd like to go back to this here. There we go. Now, the last area we're going to address is monitoring employee theft. We'll look at cash receipts, ghost tenants, and employees opening on time, and a couple of others that we would like to show you. On cash receipts, I'm going to switch back now. I'm going to go to that Lone Star location, and it's right here. And I'm going to go to the charts, and I'm going to pull down the income, and then I'm going to look at cash receipts. Now, this is an example where I'm going to have to call the manager because this shows a perfect example where our orange line is what our average is over the last 3 months on a daily basis. The blue line represents this month. And we can see that starting about the 3rd day of the month, there have been no cash deposits made into the system. But ironically, right after the 15th, which probably is payday, then all of a sudden the cash got deposited. This would be symptomatic of a situation of an employee borrowing the cash until they got their paycheck and then putting it back into the bank. So you typically see that spike occur on the the day after the pay periods, like on the 15th and near the 30th, for example. And so because there is a gap here, and it is several $100s, about $400, that it seems to have been held for a period of time and then all of a sudden deposited. It doesn't guarantee that that's been the case, but it does look suspect, and that's something we're going to have to look at ourselves. So I want to show you a real live example of a situation that could be a problem. But we do have a tracking every day, our averages of what the income as far as cash deposit is, and taken in on the computer, and that is the current month, so that we can see that gap and spot potential problems. All right, the second area that I'd like to show you is ghost tenants, and I'm going to go to Fair Park. Excuse me one second. And we're going to go to our audit section. Bear with me again. Our software is real time, so it's crunching thousands and thousands of bits of data of every payment that's been made over the last several years to find a particular case. And I think here we're going to see 2 or 3 examples that would be. And let me explain while we're waiting what a ghost tenant is. A ghost tenant is a tenant that is in a unit but is not paying rent. And the ghost tenant may or may not even know that they're a ghost tenant. Now, if they're, one of the things that we've written is a software program with District Manager that takes a probability analysis of our cash-paying tenants and looks for a particular tenant that's paid with cash and then all of a sudden made a check payment. And what's happening is, and this tenant may not even know. Antonio Thompson, the first one, for example, has paid 49 times with cash and then all of a sudden just recently made a check payment. What could be happening is that the tenant, there is a check being deposited under Antonio's name that he may have paid actually with cash. And what it could be is a check from a ghost tenant in another unit that the manager is substituting for cash before he makes his bank deposit. And so what we would do in a situation where we have this top tenant, for example, right here, 49 and 1, those are pretty big odds. That's not to say that there definitely was theft, and I'll give you a reason or an example of how that happens. But we would want to call Antonio, and we have either call him or we can send him an email and say, Antonio, this is Paul Darden from Fair Park Self-Storage. We just want to verify our records today that we noticed that you normally pay in cash, but on 7/16 you paid with a check for $86. We just want to verify if that was correct or not. Actually, what happens is the tenant is very impressed that you know that much about the tenant. And so they don't mind saying, yeah, they say, fine, yes, no, I didn't pay with a check. I've always paid with cash. Then that means immediately you do have a ghost tenant there, and a manager is substituting a check for cash before they make their deposits. If Antonio says, yes, I did, then you can hear the reason why. I remember not too long ago making the same presentation before, and we had a 50-to-1 situation, and it was an elderly lady, and we thought it was rather unusual, so I immediately afterwards called the manager and asked them to explain what the situation was. And sure enough, they sent us a copy of the deposit slips that showed that the lady in this particular case, an elderly lady, her daughter had come in and made a payment for her and made it with a check. And that was understandable, not a problem. But it could have easily been a situation where the manager had substituted the check. So this is one of the things that you can look for on a potential ghost tenant analysis, of showing where something might be wrong that the manager is doing by taking payments on the side and in substituting a check for cash. Of course, there is still the possibility that a manager could take cash and just put it in his pocket. Now, when you find this situation to occur, typically you're going to find that the ghost tenant, if you audit your facility doing a physical audit of a walk around, you'll find that the ghost tenant is going to probably be in one of 4 types of units. They'll be either in a vacant, which is typical, or they'll be in a offline unit, they'll be in a company unit, or they'll be in a complementary unit. And so that's why you don't typically notice them. But you look, it's easy to spot when you show a vacancy report and you see a lock on a vacant unit, then you know something is probably wrong. But the others are a little trickier to find. And we have located facilities that have had as many, in previous audits years ago, I found one facility that had over 50 ghost tenants in it. The manager completely taken over the operation and was running 2 sets of books and sending the owner, out-of-state owner, 1 set of books that he was generating versus the actual books of what was actually occurring at the operation. When the owner thought it looked suspicious, he called us, and I went out and audited the facility. And out of 52 overlocks that I had, over 72 overlocks I had to put on, it turned out that 52 of them, 50 plus, were actual ghost tenants. And ironically, while I was there at the office with the manager, one of the tenants walked in and said, "There's an overlock on my unit." And I turned to the manager and just said, "Don't even try to explain." And he said, "I'll go to the bank." And of course, we had to terminate him immediately. So that's another area that you can look at is the ghost tenants. One of the other employee theft situations that can occur, we're going to look at, is theft of time. And what I'm going to do here is look at the employee logins. Now we can do this on a one-by-one basis or all stores at one time. And what I'm going to do is I have to configure how I want to look at the data. And I only want to show the late logins. And our store opens at 9 o'clock, so we'll give him a 5-minute leeway. And in the last 30 days, I know that he hasn't because I've already looked at this report, but I'll go for the current year. And then they'll show us a list and the time when the computer was first turned on at the store. So this is very important that you that are managers and or regional managers tell your employees the first thing they do when they get to the store is turn on the computer and log in. And I will have to obviously not have a problem with Glenn opening up on New Year's Day at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. We do have a question, though, that it seems like on the first of the month, on several months, here there's 3 and another one right here, that they seem to be turning in on the first of the month, logging in a little later on. But we'll have to look and see why that particular case is. And in this case, this was my regional manager that went in and not the manager that's on site. So, again, this gives us our data to prove up. And once you show one of these reports to the employees, they see that you're tracking it automatically, that they'll stop immediately logging in late and they will get to work on time. All right, one of the other areas that we look at is called jumpers. And a jumper is a tenant that either with or without the assistance of the manager is moving in and moving out several times. And what they're doing is they may be actually just moving back into the same unit, never moving out, and they're getting the benefit of your discounts or concessions that you're giving with move-ins, and they're taking advantage of it. So let's look at one right here that has 6 different concessions given, and they have 3 units. And as we go in and look at it, we can see this particular person has moved in, and the best thing to do is sort it by date. And you can see when they moved in and moved out, and if the manager, how long they actually stayed. So then you can spot how many dollars they were actually given. In this particular case, it was not a problem. They apparently changed, they moved in and moved out to correct the ledger at the time, but there was only one concession given of $62. If it had been given two concessions, then we would have had a problem. But in these particular cases, only one concession has been given. This tenant owned two different, or actually three different units, so there's not a problem here. But this is one of the things that you have to watch for. Now, a manager can take advantage of this by moving a cash-paying tenant in and out. The owner typically would not see it because there's no change in occupancy. But if the tenant is paying with cash, and let's say there's a $20 discount for moving in, then the manager could take that $50 rent that he was paying, and each time he did it, pocket $20. And I said it would be very difficult for most owners to see it because there is literally no change in occupancy because they just moved them in, moved them out, moved them in, moved them out. And that's one way they can take advantage of it. And I might at this time add, for those of you that are managers, I'm not trying to teach you how to steal. Not only our software, but in the future, other software, management softwares that are becoming aware of our algorithms are going to be analyzing this very detailed analysis of going through and looking at ways the managers potentially could be stealing. And they'll be doing it in the background, and they'll be getting their private alerts. So you won't know that they're watching behind you like we are with our employees and when there's potential problems that occur. One of the other areas that we look at is, for example, unbalanced move-outs. And I've got a different report for that. And I'm probably going to have to change my dates on this back a couple of years. Let's go back to 2010 to pick up an example. I didn't have one there. I'll have to go back even further. Well, let's try a different facility. Let's go to, I'm going to go to a different facility, one that we haven't had on that long here, Lone Star. Yeah, that I know has some situations there. Now, I think most of you all can appreciate going back and looking at a tenant ledger is a very hard thing to do to analyze, whereas we try to make it instantaneous to where we can drill down immediately to a tenant ledger when we see something that's inappropriate or appears to be inappropriate. So give me just a second as this one loads up. And I'm going to go again to unbalanced move-outs. And this particular person, for example, moved out owing us on the 14th of the month, which would have been after they were overlocked, owed us a balance of $244. Well, that's what it appears to be, but we want to drill down and look at the actual tenant ledger. And as we do that, what we find is that on September the 1st, they were charged their $213 worth of rent. But a mistake was made here. It shows that they were also charged again. At that point, the manager should have removed that. But they didn't, and they didn't realize their mistake until later. And what happened is when the tenant finally did move out and then they made the adjustment, they had the tenant pay for his rent for September and the late fees with the checks that are indicated at the top right here, and owed a balance of $244 at the time, which represented the fact that he had been charged late fees twice and rent twice where he shouldn't have been. Ideally, that should have been corrected with an adjustment back on the 1st, and we'll have to ask that manager why they didn't catch it earlier than they did at that location. So that's an example of an unbalanced move-out where we're saying how did they get out if they're overlocked, owing us such a large balance. And that would obviously be a function of how many days after the rent is due that you overlock a particular tenant. And where this could be employee theft is easily that a manager could say to, oh, Joe Smith, all right, Joe, I tell you what, yeah, it's after the 1st. Go on and pay me a few bucks, and I'll let you go on and move out, and yes, you do owe me some money. Or even if you negotiated someone out, you need to figure out how much did they end up waiving and maybe putting into their pocket in order to let the person out by unlocking the gate for the tenant, letting them go in and get their things and move out. I want to go back now. And I'd like to thank you for attending this meeting, and I wanted to tell you about District Manager, and also for those of you that we're going to be attending the SSA show here next week. We'll be having a booth there. We'd love for you to come by and ask any questions. We can show you the software in more detail. Those of you that are SiteLink users, let us know, and we'll be glad to give you a free demo that you can use for a month and see the power of our software. And all the money you save or increase in the income, that's yours for free. But once you get started, you realize that this is a real way of analyzing and drilling down on looking at your data to help you audit your facility for potential theft and also ways of making additional income. So I want to thank you at this time. And then, Keith, if you have some questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I do actually have some questions in here, Paul. How common are ghost tenants?
Actually, it's more common than the industry would like to admit. The reason we don't hear about it that often is that owners typically don't want to admit that they've had employees stealing from them. But it does occur. We, on average, see one of our clients will call us up about what looks like a suspicious situation about once every 2 months. We have well over 500 stores that we're analyzing right now. And so it does occur. And it's just, and one of the interesting things is the managers that do this, because unless you prosecute them, it doesn't typically show up on their record, and they can go from one store to another store because people are always looking for experienced managers. Yeah, they're experienced, but they're over-experienced because they know the flaws in the software and how to beat the system. So yes, to answer your question, it does occur. It's not uncommon, let's just say that.
How often should you be auditing your facility for theft?
Well, our software actually audits every 2 hours. It pings each store and analyzes all of this data, this and a lot more data that you haven't seen, every 2 hours. Normally, the physical audits typically, it's been suggested over the years to do them at least once a month. Again, if you're the owner of the store, you know what you're doing. But if you have more stores and you have managers running your operations, then a physical audit should be done. My recommendation as a minimum 1 month, but no more than waiting 3 months to physically go around and check every lock that's on a unit, especially if it's on a vacant unit. And if it's on a complimentary, then be sure you know that tenant who's getting a complimentary unit is indeed one that you agreed to. If it's on the offline unit, then have the manager open the unit up and you see if there's any contents in it. So that would be the recommended bare minimum if you're not using a software like ours that is tracking behind for you.
When is it all right to waive a fee?
Well, there's several times that you might waive a fee and be legitimate. For example, the best example is on a weekend, for example, and let's say the rent is due on Saturday and our store is closed on a Sunday, and also where holidays occur. And let's say that the tenant's due on the 1st, and the rent the 1st is on a Friday, on a Saturday, and they come in and they make a payment right after we've closed the store for the afternoon, and that deposit doesn't show up until Monday. When the manager comes back in and open up the store and they see it on the floor. I said the first month. Let's say that on Sunday the first late fee kicks in, so it should be like on the 5th in this case. They made the payment on Saturday the 5th, and Sunday morning the computer's automatically going to kick in that late fee. So Monday they come in and they've already been charged the late fee. We'll typically give them the benefit of the doubt if we found that checks have been laying on the floor over the weekend, and not to anger our managers. There are some companies, I will say, that have a no waiving of fees at all. But I think you have to use your discretion as to if it's a legitimate reason or not. For example, let's say you have a leak in a unit and so forth. You might want to waive a particular fee or something where there's an error that's been made on your part. And this happens is because the computers are not fail-safe, nor are our managers, that they will sometimes inadvertently charge someone for something that they shouldn't have. But what we want to do is give you the tools to be able to quickly go back and see all those fees that are waived and quickly find out if indeed something is going wrong by the manager, like having a favored tenant where they're constantly waiving the fees over and over again. Sometimes a corporation, for example, we have the state for a tenant. In the state, their check didn't get to us on time or something like that, and they've been consistently for years paying on time, but for whatever reason, their check didn't get to us. Well, we'll probably waive that late fee for the state in that case, and it's not a problem. But that's one of the things that's very important, that the notes fields in whatever your software should have each time a manager waives a fee, they should be giving a reason for waiving that fee. And to give you a little side background, about 20 years ago, I paid the first software company that did this, MSTC, to put in the note field. Because as we were tracking behind our managers, we said we don't have to call our managers and find out if we see if they had a note in there that told us why they did it, and we could say, oh yeah, we agree with that, we understand that. So about 20 some odd years ago, I paid to have that put into the first software, and ever since then, all the other software companies have picked up that reasoning. So it's very critical that managers put in the reason behind it, so that you're not constantly always calling the managers asking why they did something.
Now, what about auctions?
Auctions create a real problem for us. Matter of fact, we're working on that right now to where we can quickly match up those people that are been auctioned off. And because when they're auctioned off, you usually have to waive or post as bad debt a lot of fees and a lot of rent that could be the case. And right now, we're working on expanding our operations to be able to automatically eliminate those out of the exceptions when we know that they've been auctioned off. And in the interim, though, what you can do is keep a list of your tenants that have been auctioned off. And as you look and see the exceptions with that tenant's name on, and you know they've been auctioned, then the manager hasn't done anything wrong. They've just been cleaning off that rent and fees that have racked up on an auction tenant. Where similar to an auction, we'll expand the question a little bit, is when you really do have to track when people are negotiated out, because there is also that same waiving off of bad debt when they've been negotiated out. But that's where the manager could be taking advantage. You really have to track that closely to see that while those fees, some of those fees have been waived out of there, that the manager hadn't pocketed some money on their own.
Okay, and what happens when you change your standard rates?
Well, when you change your standard rate, and one of the things that I'd like to say at the very, very beginning, don't do your standard rates once a year, twice a year. Look at your occupancies every month and change the standard rates on those units that you're running out of. And also, more importantly, you have to watch what your competitors are doing. So you do need to do a market survey, because if they drop their rates, you don't want to be out there $10 higher than they are, and all of a sudden they're getting all the clients and you're not. So you have to, number one, watch the market conditions, and then do not be afraid to change your standard rates when you're very well occupied, when you're down to a couple of different units, a couple of units in a particular size and type. One of the things you can do to monitor that is to go back historically and look at how many units you lease at that particular size and type in that particular month, and you can say, well, look, I'm going to run out of 2 units. I've only got 2 because I typically lease 5 in that month. Well, you should be definitely raising the standard rates on those units, and that should not be something that should be wait till the first of the year or middle of the year, whenever companies do this. You'll find that if you're going to compete with the REITs, you're going to have to analyze this data monthly to be able to do it. Now, what happens when you raise the standard rate? It just increases the potential income that you can receive. And one of the things is we're running out of units, and let's say a tenant's $3 below the standard rate, and we're running out of those units. We're not going to just raise them to the standard rate. We may push that person and raise them $5 if we can to $2 higher than the standard rate that we have right now. In essence, testing the market, will that standard rate be able to go up $2 more, and before the tenant chooses to move out.
Okay. Well, Paul, that was excellent, sir. That was all the questions that we had today. I do want to thank everybody for attending today. I hope you did. We did provide you with some useful information to assist you with your investment. And Paul, I do want to thank you very much for. I had no idea you were traveling this far today, so it's thank you so much for your time and for your time today. And also, I do want to invite everyone to join us again we'll have another webinar on October 2nd, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Gabe.